Want to talk? So let's talk. Here. Talk. You want to talk? You gotta talk. You need to talk. News talk.
I talk, you talk to Solomon. I talk, you talk to Solomon. Yeah, let's talk to Solomon. Talk to Solomon.
You gotta talk. You wanna talk.
You know, there's a movie out called The Night of the Condors. This is going to be the night of the lawyers. I believe we're going to see cheating and aggressive activity, which will involve legal involvement in, I'll just throw a number out here, 5 or 10% of the entire vote. I don't believe we're going to know who the next president is. I don't know if we're going to know the answers to who will control the Senate. I don't think we even know who some of the governors are, because I think they're going to be challenges from both sides, and many of them legitimate, many of them not legitimate. I think there's a strategy on the left that says for everything that the Republicans say the Democrats have done, accuse the Republicans of doing it. It doesn't make any difference if they have or they haven't, because then the courts will say, to make both sides happy, we won't do anything about either side. That's kind of the strategy. I'll start with you, Greg. Your thoughts.
Well, you can always expect that in a tight election, but honestly, you know, until 2000, there really weren't election law specialists, and then we had the debacle of 2000 with the contested election, and now they're actually teaching courses in election law and how to steal elections in the courtroom instead of at the ballot box. It's a little more palatable, I guess, and apparently more honorable. You call it Night of the Condor. I'm going to call it Night of the Vulture, if that's the case. Of course, vultures do not pick on the bodies of dead lawyers, because there's some things even vultures will not do.
Dr. Tues, on that bright note?
Well, that's a great one to hand it to me on. Well, that's cheery. Actually, though, Stan, the silver lining and the possibility that some doubt may hang over the fate, particularly of the national government, might be what happens and did happen. I went through it again just recently. I'm sure people in the last decade or so, we've been through it a fair amount. Starting, of course, with the whole scare over the coming of the new millennia, which we decided to celebrate a year before it came and stuff. But leave that aside. All of it tended to get people to think about what they fall back on if these structures we take for granted at the national level and so forth aren't there. Can you take care of yourself? Can you take care of your family? What do you do? Does it scare you out of your wits so you just sit off in the corner and wait to die? I think most people discovered that that's not what they did, and that there are resources within us that start to plan what we're going to do and how we're going to survive, and start to look around at our world a little differently, to look for the resources that, if you're just thrown back on yourself, would keep you alive from day to day, until, as and when, things were put back together on a more sophisticated basis. The thing that's really got me to thinking about that, it hasn't to do with elections and all of that. It has to do with the fact that elements of nature, including the sun's activity, could very well take all our sophisticated junk that depends on electronics, right, and toss it onto the ash heap for a while. Just like that. On a massive scale, because nature operates that way, so that it would blow out all over the continent and the world, possibly. And what do you do then? Do you just sort of say, oh, we're back in the Stone Age, we'll act like beasts? No, because in point of fact, before there were electronics, there were still decent people who associated with each other, worked together, had farms, shared what they could in order to survive, and became aware that the fundamental unit through which you are, by God's grace, supposed to be able to answer two questions: who do you love and who do you trust? That fundamental unit, the natural family, needs to be respected and preserved. Now, sometimes I wonder whether some of the difficulties we may have to face, Stan, aren't in point of fact things that God intends for our good. Like the chastisements that we, if we're trying to do them good, will sometimes impose on our children, that we hope will teach them about resources that they have within themselves of good conscience and good character and so forth. And also self-sufficiency and independence and abilities to make decisions and so forth. I think that we've allowed all of these would-be tyrants and elitists to talk us into believing something about ourselves that isn't true. And I think that though it may look like great difficulty and terrible things, maybe some of the events that may be shaping up are intended to get us to think about the resources that are available and that we ought to understand to be major resources we have to keep alive, like our local governments, like our reliance on our neighbors, and so forth. Because we've let these people sort of pull us into a world that's too distant. And we've forgotten to know ourselves and to know each other, starting with the people in our own family.
All right, let's, well, I keep hitting the same topics, really.
Well,
but
can I get in on that for just a second?
Go ahead, Greg. Go ahead.
Well, one thing I've been noticing in the conservative movement is this disturbing trend that we need government to fix things. You know, I watch these conservatives on Twitter, and they're going, well, as soon as we get so-and-so in office, we can get things fixed. I'm like, no, I talk to them, I go, you're no better than the liberals. You're waiting for a top-down solution. Don't you understand that the solution to all of America's problems are going to have to come from the bottom up? If you're waiting for a top-down managed solution, the government coming down and ending your problems, you're no better than the liberal sitting at home waiting for his mail from the government with his check and his EBT card to go get his free food at the grocery store. If you want to make a difference in America, it is going to have to come from you, and it's going to have to come from the ground up. If you're disgusted with the Republican Party, which I have not belonged to for a number of years, okay? If you want to see change in that party, it's not going to come from putting the right man at the top of the party. You're going to have to take over the party from the grassroots, and you're going to have to turn it around inside, or you're going to simply have to say a pox on both your houses and form a new party. And people go, oh, don't do that. You'll just give all the power to the liberals. You know what? I'm sick and tired of that. I think it's a lie. I think what we're going to have to do is start understanding that if we're going to make real change in America, we're going to have to stop listening to the people that were so-called leaders, because they haven't done a very good job. They have led us into $16 trillion worth of debt, and you can't say either party is all responsible for it, because there is nothing in the laws that has not been voted on by both parties at one time or another. Okay? Now, Romney is a far cry better than Obama in many regards, but I view him, and I voted for him today, only as a stepping stone to something better. But if we're going to make a change in America, we're going to have to stop looking for top-down solutions and understand that we, the people, once meant something. And it better start meaning something again, or we're going to be a lost cause, and we will have no redemption.
Well, you know, if I could jump in with one thing, that wonderful line, you know, we have to stick with these Republicans. Who's going to save us from the liberals? And you do realize, don't you, that's my particular source of deep frustration about this election. Excuse me, y'all. I don't care what anybody tries to say. I simply am not going to make the sacrifice of the intellect required to stop seeing Mitt Romney for what he is. He is a liberal. We have turned all the power over to liberals. What these people told us we were going to stop has happened. And the only thing that's different about the present situation is that they've all agreed to lie to each other and call this liberal something else. Well, I won't. I won't lie about it. That's a liberal. You know, oh, we got to have this liberal to save us from the communists. They could say that, but nobody would buy that, so they got to call him something else. Because it never occurred to anybody we'd have an election in which we had a dyed-in-the-wool, top 10 in the nation liberal running against a dyed-in-the-wool, #1 in the world commie.
Well, so, you know, that's cutting through it right there.
They didn't save us from the liberals. They delivered us to the communists so that we would then look at this liberal guy as a savior. That's what has happened, and that's madness. I'm sorry. That's a huge problem.
All right, we have just a few minutes left in the show. Let's talk about prognostications based on where we are right now. Right now, we have a situation where the popular vote seems to be going toward Romney, 10.2 million to 9.4 million. But of course, we haven't had California, which has a lot of people report in, which could make up that difference. So we have a close election. There is no ifs, ands, or buts. We have a close election. What happens? What do you think will happen if Romney wins? What do you think will happen if Obama wins? Let's start with you, Greg. What do you think will happen if Romney wins?
Well, I think people will feel a momentary elation, but anyone who thinks they can turn their back on him, and I've said this quite publicly on Twitter, if you think you can turn your back on him and the Republican House and the Republican Senate, hopefully, then you're kidding yourselves, because I have not seen anything out of the Republican House since 2010, and they can claim that they were bottled up by a Democratic Senate, but there was some business that the Republican House had full and original jurisdiction over, such as articles of impeachment, which they did not have the stomach or the stones to do. So I think that people will initially feel better. I don't think that you will hear one more bit about, as Alan said earlier, the fair tax or the flat tax after tonight. I don't think that you will see much in the way of anything in terms of getting rid of Obamacare completely. I think you'll hear this repeal and replace, where the government has absolutely no business whatsoever being involved in our health care, but they will find a way to be involved in it in any case. I am a person who believes that the government should stay within the confines of Article 1, Section 8. I will go to my grave probably never seeing it happen, but I will go to my grave fighting for it all the same. And that is what I think will happen if Romney's elected. If Obama's elected, I can see a faster and more quick slide for the death of the United States, but I see a death of the United States in either case unless we move back to the original intent, Article 1, Section 8, 10th Amendment, and the people of this country taking the power that was intended for them from the beginning.
Dr. Keys.
Here, here. I just agree with all of that. I think that that is the case. In terms of what we will see, I actually put it this way in an article I had up for the last couple of days for anybody who stopped by the site to find out what I was doing, which I did today. Didn't vote for Obama, didn't vote for Romney, voted for all the Republicans available in my state and district, whom I knew to be people who had not repudiated the Republican platform, and thankfully there were a couple of good people who are actually standing for the right things. Because I think that the key is to make a demonstration of one's own independence of spirit and mind and the deep commitment to restoring and preserving the true American Republic, the true constitutional system of self-government by a decent, conscientious, God-fearing people that we're supposed to have. For people who have that goal, and who are committed to that restoration and preservation of the Republic. I think if Obama wins, we're in for another 4 years of battle. And I think people will be galvanized to engage in that battle. I have rarely seen such pervasive willingness to go outside the box as we saw in the last couple of years on the part of clergy and other folks who understand what's coming down the pike with Obama and are finally standing up to say no, even if we have to stand in defiance of your lawless so-called edicts. We are not going to bow to this tyranny. So it would be a fight, and it would be an intense one. It might even at some point spill over outside the boundaries of the constitutional means available, because that happens sometimes. And that is not something we should welcome or anything like it, but I think it's something we need to be having the courage to see and face and not be afraid of. On the other hand, if Romney wins, I think we're in for 8 years of intense battle against the desire to take us to that same socialism, to impose upon us that same government domination, only it will be more cleverly conducted. And there will be the hardest part of the battle will not be going against the leftist, regressive folks who are trying to destroy our Constitution and our way of life. The hardest part of the battle is going to be to rouse the folks who will be sitting there saying, well, we got to give him a chance, or, well, if we don't support him, even though this is leftist junk, then bad Democrats will come back in and they'll do so much worse. And inch by inch, day by day, month by month, year by year, we will step into that place where we can no longer return to the liberty we're supposed to have. And I'll be frank with you, Stan. I think we're more likely to get to that place with Romney than with Obama. I think it would come to open battle before we would accept it from Obama. But where Romney is concerned, the one thing I will grant in terms of people say, oh, great leader and so forth, is that he has had the skill, as he demonstrated in Massachusetts, to push this agenda of leftism over the objections and soothing the spirit and quieting the resistance of conservatives who should know better. And that's a really dangerous ability, dangerous for our liberty. And I think that's going to be the toughest part of the battle ahead if and when Mitt Romney wins.
Well, you've heard from two very bright people. I'll throw this in. I think if Romney wins, you will see a dramatic increase in the market. You will see an uptick in job activity and investment, because people will assume and believe that things are going in the right direction. I also think we will have rioting, not a little bit, but a lot. And I think we are going to go in for a very, very rough time as people on the left believe they were cheated, and they'll believe that, believe that it's a lie, and they'll believe that, believe that everyone really loves Obama, and they believe that, and believe that if they don't fight, then they're not doing their part. And I think that's going to provide an incredible amount of chaos in this country. At any rate, on that note, we're going to call tonight. We can't call a thing other than the expected states for Obama are going for Obama. The expected states for Romney are going for Romney. We haven't had Florida. We haven't had Ohio. We haven't had Virginia. We haven't had New Hampshire. We haven't had Iowa. None of the states that were the so-called toss-up states called, other than North Carolina has been called. So,
but they're trending in the right direction, Stan.
I'm not disagreeing. They're trending, and I frankly believe that Romney is going to win. But we will see, and then we'll talk about it next week. Dr. Keyes, you're an incredible intellect and a real treasure for this country, and I consider it a privilege for you to share this much time with us and our audience. Greg, you're a very bright guy, and you'll be doing great things if you can just keep the arrows from sticking in your butt. I, on the other hand, am too old to give a damn. Good night, everyone. Good night, my friends.
Good night, Stan.